Hi everyone, welcome to my talk for FOSSASIA Summit 2024. And today I'll be talking about a primer on open source licensing. Before I start, I would like to introduce myself. Uh, I am Shubhendra and I work as a developer advocate at Cashfree Payments. Cashfree Payments is India's one of the leading payments and API banking company. And I'm also a Mozilla representative, and I help local tech communities to contribute to Mozilla and open source. And I have been a GitHub campus expert. I also curate a newsletter for open source called ossbytes.dev. So today I'm going to talk about why choose an open source license, why do we use a license, and what is the value of that, and what are open source licenses, what they are, what do they mean, and what impact they have on open source project. And finally, how to choose the right open source license. So the right is in double quotes there because it is not going to be same for everybody. Now the caveat of all of this is that I am not a lawyer. And why mentioning this is important, because intellectual property is a big deal, and the license that you choose for a project has a big impact on that. So the information that I'm going to give you, while it is going to be informative and helpful for choosing a project, so if you are ever in a legal dispute, you can't just talk about this one guy you met at FOSSASIA told you about this. It's just not gonna fly out. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a helpful developer to all other developers. Now, the other important statement I want to make to set this presentation all up is that code is art. And I don't mean it because I'm a developer who writes code and loves staring at the algorithms. I mean it from the legal perspective. All the code you write is considered as a creative work. It's the same thing as writing a book, producing a song, or producing a painting. So when you write a piece of code, it's considered as an artistic piece of work. And, uh, and this is important to know because just like you produce a song or write a book, you own on it what's known as copyright. So the same thing is with all the code that you write. As soon as you write the line of code, you are the copyright owner. You are the sole owner of that property. Well, what is copyright? It actually goes back to the saying that uh, you are the owner uh, and only you have the right to produce the copies and distribute the copies of your work. So in terms of software, what this means is that let's say you write the code, and the moment you write the code, it's yours. So you have the copyright and you are the sole owner. So you have the right to say to person A and B to use your code in their project in whatever means they want to do. But person A can't go to other these two people and give away your code for using or distributing it. They will have to come back to you, and because you are the copyright owner of your work. So copyright protects your legal right to control who can distribute and alter your software. Now that's great, and it may be useful in some cases, but in other cases in the world today, it may not be useful, because what copyright also does, as it comes with limitations. So, such as when you write code, it is automatically copyrighted. Only you get to define how it is going to be used. So let's say for the sake of this presentation, you wrote a software for GPS navigation, and what if that software could be used for autonomous vehicles? And what if it could be applied to rocket ships that could self-land like SpaceX? If you're not thinking of these use cases while writing your software, then you're probably not helping solving these problems. And it's going to be used for only one thing that you are going to define it for. Also, when your code is copyrighted, only you get to add improvements to it. So again, we have a software for GPS navigation, and let's say you want to add a GUI on top of it. You can you can make improvements or you can add more code to it because you're the copyright holder. But let's say someone else were to come along and say, hey, I was using this software and I think this will be a great improvement to your software. uh, they really can't contribute to it. That's unfortunate because you are the copyright owner of your work, and the code that they will write, they will be the copyright owner of their code. So there's this whole gray area where you put their copyrighted code in your copyrighted code, then who owns the copyright? So that's how legal disputes happen. So with this idea of being copyrighted code or using it as a or making it open source, I always go back to this one question. uh, as developers, we need to ask for ourselves, like, why do we write software? So I'm sure most of you are gonna agree, like, with what I'm going to say now. So we came up with an idea that there is a problem in the world, and we want to fix it or make it better. So we write software as developers to fix the world's problem. And that's great. But we only have so much insight into the world and the problem that they have. So by open sourcing our software, we make our software available to the world and they can contribute or improve it. So we can say that, hey, I produced this software which is fixing this problem or improving it. And after making it open source, the rest of the world can say, oh yeah, then this is how you can improve it. So it actually allows us to build the software that changes the world and opens it up to everybody. Now I want to talk a little bit about what open source means. So there's this idea that open source means software is free. No, just because you open source your software doesn't mean it has to be giveaway for free. When you can open source your software and still make money out of it. Tons of companies do it. Open source means inviting others to contribute to your code and improve on it. And this is why I'll get into why we should use open source licenses so that you can protect your intellectual property and which is the creative work or code that you write. Now let's talk about the licenses in general. Licenses comes with the rights and obligations. Rights are the things that a person is allowed to do, and obligations are the things that person should follow while using your software. Now, what is open source license? Open source license basically dictates the terms and conditions that comes with the use of open source software, basically the rights and obligations. It serves as a legal agreement between the author of the open source and the user of the open source software. So author makes the open source software available with certain guidelines that the user must follow. But what if I don't apply an open source license? In that case, whoever contributes to your project, be it code, content, or graphics, whether it is a minor contribution, that contributor becomes the exclusive copyright holder of their work. And nobody can use or modify their code or content. And that nobody includes you. An open source license should allow the software to be freely used, modified, or distributed by establishing certain guidelines. And these guidelines are rights and obligations. And if it is not there, then it's not really open source. So there's this misunderstanding among new developers that if they just release their project on GitHub, then it becomes open source. No, GitHub gives us an option to like make our project public or private, but just simply releasing your project publicly on GitHub is not same as licensing your project. If you want others to use, modify, distribute, or contribute to your project, then you should include a right license in your project. So there are a lot of licenses available, and these are the most commonly used licenses that are used by popular open source projects. If you are starting from the blank slate, MIT, it's hard to go wrong with the MIT license. So it's very short, easy to understand, and allows anyone to do anything with the project as long as they are keeping the copy of license and your copyright notice. So if you use MIT, you are also allowed to change the license in future if you ever need to do. Apache 2.0 and GPL v3 are the other popular licenses, but there are other options to choose from. You can find the full text of these licenses and instructions of how to use them on chooselicense.com. So till now we have licenses for code, but what if the creative content is not code, but a graphics or a video? So there's this organization called Creative Commons. They provide a suite of licenses for such creative work. YouTube, Wikipedia, Wikimedia, Vimeo, they use licenses from Creative Commons. So Creative Commons also provide a license chooser. You can visit this website, creativecommons.org/choose, and choose a license for your creative work if it's not code. So to conclude, if you ever need to make your project an open source, you will need to add an open source license on your project. Luckily, there is an organization called Open Source Initiative, and they have been around since 1998. All they do is like evaluate open source licenses and approve or deny them. There are around 200 open source licenses, and 100 of them are approved by Open Source Initiative. So you can check them out at opensource.org/licenses. Now, finally, I can't for your project, but I can definitely tell you the guidelines that you can follow to select the right license for your open source project. First and foremost, use the license approved by OSI, Open Source Initiative. Second, read the license before you use it. So this can be a hard one because all the licenses are written in legalese, and none of us are lawyers. So there's a fun website called tldrlegal.com. You can just visit that website, select a license, and all the licenses, terms and conditions are written in basic English terms. So you can quickly have a glance at what that license provides. And most important thing, do not change your license once released. And this is for as per version of your software. Let's say you released version 1 of your software with some weak license, and then in future you want to have more control over your license or software, then you decide to change the license, then you cannot do it on version 1 of your software. You need to release another version, maybe v2, and then only you can change the license on it. And this is why, because when you open source your software, it is assumed that someone has already copied or made some changes to your project that has initial license on it. So with that, it ends. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and feel free to ask any questions if you have any related to open source or open source licensing. And you guys can visit my website at camelkillsky.com. Anyone has any questions?
Do we have any questions? Okay, yeah. Maybe.
Thank you. So I found a lot of projects on GitHub that have like copyleft license. So I want to ask, like, what is the difference between the copyright license and the copyleft license?
That's a good question. Open source licenses are basically divided into two, permissive and copyleft. So copyleft basically arrived from the copyright, like it's the opposite of copyright. So what permissive licenses does, they allows the user of your open source software to use whatever license they want. Like let's say you create a software with the MIT license, right? I want to use another license on my project that is a fork of your project. So I can use if I'm like you're using permissive license. But if you're using copyleft licenses on your project, I can't use. There are certain guidelines that I have to follow, including the license that you have already put up on your project. So it's you'll have to go into deep, like what are the differences between copyleft and permissive. But that's a broader overview difference between them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So